And today is Friday, August the 14th, the year 2020. It's great to be back for the first edition of the Brian on Baseball podcast of this new season. I'm Brian Goudsword. It's been a while as we last were with you in the early part of March when, frankly, it was a different world out there. And at that time, I don't think anyone saw a global pandemic coming, but that's exactly what we've been dealing with now for quite some time and frankly still are dealing with. The hope is that we can get things under control sooner rather than later, but the good news is we do have a baseball season, and there was a time where we didn't think we would have one, so any baseball that we do get to watch in 2020 is a good thing. And I have to say that this early part of the season, it's not really even that early. As we know, it's only a 60-game season, and we're already at the one-third mark of the year to this point. So, unfortunately, we've had some difficulties getting things started for this season. I had my own virus scare, but now we're ready to go and ready to dive into this season. We'll get to plenty of analysis on the locals, both the Mets and the Yankees, and preview their series coming up this weekend. Also, stock up, stock down. We're going to take a look at two teams that are heading in the right direction and two not so much. Plus, we introduce a new segment. We're going to highlight one series to watch each weekend we do the show here. I'll have a pick for this weekend, plus this day in baseball history, and more. But 2020 has been strange when you take a peek at the standings, and what you find is that the Marlins, Orioles, and Tigers all have something in common. And no, it's not that they're the three worst teams in baseball, as many expected coming into the year. It's that at the third mark of the season, they are all above 500. Well, that's 2020 for you in a nutshell. Now, who knows how long it'll last for any of those three teams, but it's a good story, especially when you factor in the Marlins dealing with their own significant outbreak of the virus. They have not been the only team to this point, the Cardinals as well. And, when the news was breaking about the Marlins and, 16 players testing positive, including staff members as well, you thought this season probably wasn't going to be for too long, that it was headed for a shutdown. But give Major League Baseball credit, they plowed through. For the most part, the numbers have been down. I mean, overall, the positive testing percentage is something like under 0.5%, so they've been able to get through this season. It's unfortunate that there have been a lot of games postponed, but you had to expect that was going to be part of the deal here for this season. The bottom line is they're playing. The product is not bad. Sure, you'd like to see fans in the seats, but I'm enjoying watching the games. And, one thing that we are finding, last season there was a ton of talk about the juice baseball, quote-unquote. Well, the ball is flying again this year. It certainly looks like whatever the ball was last year, it's the same kind of condition this season because the home runs are popping out left and right. But I'm going to take the approach to not complain about it. I'm just going to enjoy the games. There's been plenty to complain about this year, so why don't we just enjoy the season and forget about some of the negative things that have popped into our heads about this game that we love in recent years. As for the locals, I'll get to the Yankees in a little bit as they have an upcoming weekend series against the Red Sox and plenty to say about them. But I'll start with the Mets, who were in action yesterday and got a win. And it's been kind of an uneven start for this Met team this season. There's been a consistent theme that they've lacked to get the big hit. They've been getting guys on base. Their on-base percentage, their team batting average has been good. It's been top half of the league this year, but the inability to capitalize with runners in scoring position has plagued them for a good part up to this point, although the last couple of days we've started to see that turn and we've started to see what this lineup is capable of when things are clicking, and early on it just wasn't. Pete Alonso got off to a terrible start. We know they're dealing with issues in the starting rotation, but you look at yesterday's starter, the rookie left-hander David Peterson, he has helped solidify things, and he's been kind of a godsend to this team, who's without, as we know, Noah Syndergaard and Marcus Stroman, who was out with injury and now opting out of the season, and Michael Wacha, who hadn't gotten off to a very good start, and now he's on the shelf. So they have needed any help that they can get, and Peterson has provided that. Already winning a few games. He's kept the ERA under 3. Was very good in the win over Washington yesterday. And you look at the game yesterday, and it was really Tomas Nido Day, who cracked 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, including a grand slam. So hopefully the Mets can take that momentum into Philadelphia this weekend. Like I said, the offense has been pretty good. You got to love the start from Michael Conforto, who's been very consistent. Unfortunately, a little bit of a setback yesterday's Jeff McNeil, who made a tremendous catch, crashing into the wall in left field to save a couple runs, a potential extra base hit, but had to be carted off the field. Fortunately, it is only a day-to-day situation, so hopefully the Mets get McNeil back in the lineup sooner rather than later, because we know how indispensable he is to this lineup. A couple other bright spots. You have to like the start from J.D. Davis, and one guy who you're hearing a lot of fans talk up in the early part of the season, and for good reason, is the rookie Andres Gimenez, who really just looks like he belongs. You know, he has good instincts, he fields very well, whether it's at shortstop or second base, and he's shown a nice approach at the plate, a good line drive hitter. Look, you don't have to have power to excel in this game. There's nothing wrong with being a table setter or being a guy who's going to hit at the bottom of the lineup, and Gimenez is a guy who just looks like he belongs. He's very poised for a young age. He hits the ball hard. He's fielding his position nicely. He just looks like the kind of guy that could make an impact at the big league level. And you know what? He might be putting some pressure on Ahmed Rosario, who's been out of the lineup now the last couple of games battling a stomach bug. And Rosario hasn't gotten off to the best of starts. So I think the jury's still out on who is the long-term shortstop. But if it's not Rosario, if he falters for some reason, Mets look like they have a viable potential replacement in Gimenez. Yes, it's still early. You want to see more, but you have to like a lot of what you see from the young infielder. So the Mets now off back-to-back wins. They were able to salvage a split against the Nationals. It would be nice to see if they could get Juan Soto out and have him not hit the ball 10 miles. I mean, the guy is just putting on a show. It seems to be against everybody, but the Mets in particular, I mean, he is just demolishing the baseball at Citi Field. Some of the home runs he put on display during this series, it was really something to watch, and he's a special player for a Nationals team that has not gotten off to the best of starts. And I think a lot of people saw perhaps a World Series hangover coming, kind of some adjustments after Anthony Rendon left for the Angels on a big contract. The lineup was definitely going to take a hit. There's no doubt about that. Yes, they still have great starting pitching, although Strasburg started his year late and is trying to get going. But you look at the division as a whole, and I think you have to see the teams sort of bunched up at this point. The Braves look like they're the best team, although they're dealing with some issues right now, mainly injuries. And Ronald Acuna is set to miss this weekend. He has a wrist injury, as does the second baseman Ozzie Albies. So the Braves, who have their own pitching issues to deal with injury-wise, are in not great shape as far as their injury situation. The best team on paper in the division, and then I think you stack up the other three, and now you have to throw the Marlins in because of the start that they've gotten off to, which of course has caught everybody by surprise. But then you get to the Phillies, who are going to be the Mets opponent this weekend, and this is a team that has just had all sorts of bullpen troubles. They've actually pitched starting-wise very well. Zach Wheeler, who the Mets are going to see this weekend, off to a good start. Aaron Nola, we know, is a front-of-the-rotation starter. Arrieta, pretty good. But the bullpen is just giving up games. They got swept this week against the Orioles, who I mentioned in the open, another team shockingly over 500. Phillies have to find a way to nail down games late, and one of the things that Joe Girardi has as a strength as a manager is managing a bullpen. We saw that all those years managing the Yankees. It could not be off to a worse start for him in his new stop in Philadelphia. Offensively, Bryce Harper is clicking, and I thought this was going to be a big year for Harper. I thought the short season, 60 games, see, some guys are just good for certain segments of the season, and I think that benefits a guy like Harper, who's just tearing the cover off the ball right now, as is the catcher JT Realmuto, who the Phillies hope to get locked up to a contract extension. Of course, he's a free agent at season's end. But outside of those two, they're struggling to find a rhythm. They got a lot of their other key guys slumping, whether it's McCutchen or Rhys Hoskins or Gene Segura. So the Phillies aren't all together right now. If they can get the bullpen to lock down some games, they have a chance. And like I said, I think you have to put them on an somewhat even playing field with the Mets and the Nationals. I think it's going to be very interesting to see who jumps out ahead out of those three, while I give the Braves the upper hand in the division to this point. And now moving on to the other side of town and the Yankees, and I think this has been the start that you would have expected if you're a Yankee fan. This team has power up and down the lineup. It's been on full display. There are some concerns, though, that come with this team. Mainly for me is the back end of the starting rotation. And J. Happ has not gotten the job done early on. James Paxton has had his issues. So outside of Cole and Tanaka, the question is going to be, can the Yankees get enough out of the rest of the rotation to just be serviceable enough? Because we know this team's going to put up plenty of runs. They're going to hit the ball out of the ballpark a ton, and they haven't yet clicked on all cylinders. I mean, Gleyber Torres is off to a terrible start. I don't put too much stock into that. I think he's going to be fine. I do have more concerns about Gary Sanchez, who, let's face it, he has to hit in order to make a difference, because we know he has his shortcomings defensively, and those are always going to be there. But if he's going to hit under 100 and not hit for power, he's pretty useless. Now, maybe his home run the other day against the Braves will start to get him going. He's a very streaky hitter by nature. He can hit home runs in bunches, and then he can go in these ice-cold spells where it seems like he goes a month without getting a hit. But he's an important cog in this lineup, especially now because Giancarlo Stanton, surprise, surprise, has had yet another injury setback. And I like the way Stanton was swinging the bat early on in the season. You think back to opening day, crushing that ball off Scherzer. He was looking like a different player. He was looking healthier, more athletic, and then boom, yet another injury. So it just doesn't seem to end for him, and really just seems like his tenure in New York is going to continue to be disappointing until he can stay on the field with any kind of consistency. DJ LeMahieu, you wondered what he could do for an encore after such an outstanding season a year ago. Well, he's been better to start this year, hitting north of 400, so the guy just continues to live up to the nickname The Machine. And he's just so fun to watch in an age where so many guys are swinging for the fences. He's just putting the bat on the ball and hitting it all over the field and doing it with regularity. I mean, it's just been something to watch. We always knew he could hit in Colorado, but boy, he is just taking it to a new level since signing that 2-year deal with the Yankees, and it'll be very interesting to see if they're able to retain him. I'm sure he's going to be a high priority for Brian Cashman to keep around long term. But this lineup is so good, you don't even have room for the Miguel Andújars of the world, who was so good a couple of years ago, and now he can't even find a spot on this roster. Clint Frazier is up and down. He's up and down. When he's here, he seems like he hits, but it just doesn't seem to come with any kind of consistency. But again, the Stanton injury gives him a chance now to show what he can do. If they could put him in the lineup consistently, just leave him alone and let him hit, I think he can produce. I think he could put up some decent numbers, so we'll see from that standpoint. And then you get to the number one thing with the Yankees, and that's the fact that Aaron Judge is back to playing at an MVP level. And it's great to see because he's finally healthy. He's got, 9 home runs already. Looks like the Judge from when he came up in 2016, had his struggles, and then 2017 was the monster breakout season, and he's looking more like that player to start this year, and that's big for the Yankees because we know he's the face of this team when it's all said and done, one of the faces of baseball, and him playing at this level is very good for the game. So now the Yankees will get the Red Sox for a second time, and boy, are the Red Sox in dire straits. Through the offseason, I was interested. They were one of the real intriguing teams for me just because I thought they still had a lot of talent offensively. Yes, they were going to have their question marks in the rotation, but I was interested to see, could this team find a way to be competitive, be a winning team? Well, the results are in, and this team's a total mess. I mean, we knew the rotation was going to have problems. Why? Well, Chris Sale, Tommy John surgery, out for the year. Eduardo Rodriguez has a heart complication from COVID-19. They lost Rick Porcello in free agency to the Mets. David Price was traded as part of the Mookie Betts deal to the Dodgers and opted out of the season. So that leaves only one guy left from last year's rotation. That's Nathan Eovaldi. He's pitching fine. They have Martin Perez. Other than that, they're running out relievers, guys you've never even heard of. This pitching staff is in total shambles. And then you go to the offense, and they just haven't hit. at all. I mean, it's some key players. J.D. Martinez, who's been a monster in a Red Sox uniform, he's just not producing. Rafael Devers, he with Bogarts last year both had tremendous offensive seasons. You haven't even noticed Devers this season. Benintendi, I don't know where he's been. So it's just not working for the Red Sox. Clearly, it's going to be big-time sell mode. They basically already come out and said as much. And this is a team that's going to have to do a lot of retooling. And now you look at it, and it really looks like it was a no-brainer to trade Mookie Betts. Not because he's not a great player, because we know he is, but the fact is you couldn't sign him to a $400+ million deal and leave this farm system in the shape that it is. You had to find a way to get some prospects, which they did. They didn't have to worry about that sizable financial commitment, and now they can focus on retooling the farm system. They have the right guy in charge in Hein Bloom, who did such a great job in Tampa with the Rays. So, look, it might take a little while for the Red Sox, but this edition right now is just not good. It's one of the weaker teams in the league. I mean, you look at the landscape right now, and there's only a very few teams that you would pronounce completely out of it as far as 2020 goes, and the other two are the Pirates and the Mariners. So them with the Red Sox, not exactly what you would have thought of if you're a Red Sox fan going into this season, but it has just been a dreadful start. They got blown out this week by the Rays. Yesterday, something like 17-8. I mean, they're giving up tons of runs, not producing with the bats, and they're right there for the taking now for the Yankees this weekend, who've already swept them once, and should be a good opportunity for the Yankees to get fat on them again this weekend. Moving on now to the next segment, we're going to take a look at two teams that we're putting in the stock up category and two in the other direction, stock down. Now, a couple of these I would have picked. I had planned on doing over-under picks if we got a show in earlier this season. Unfortunately, that wasn't able to happen, but I got one in each category, one who I thought was going to be an over, well, I should say two that I thought were going to be overs. One I'd been right about, the other not so much. So let's start with the stock up, and one is the Colorado Rockies. And this was a team that made the playoffs in both 2017 and 18. Last year was a total disaster. The big difference, the 2 years they made the playoffs, their rotation pitched well. Last year, they all took major steps back. Kyle Freeland went from being a Cy Young contender to the minor leagues. Herman Marquez and John Gray, none of them worked out last season. Well, you look at the early part of this year, and they're all pitching well, and you throw in Antonio Senzatella, another right-hander, off to a pretty good start. And I look at this team, and I say, playing at Coors Field, the talent that they have offensively, you know they're going to score runs. The key always comes down to the rotation. Early on, they're pitching well, they're scoring runs because they have plenty of stars in the lineup. Trevor Story now, by the way, is one of the best players in the game. You know about Nolan Arenado, Daniel Murphy's hitting to start this year, and then, oh, by the way, Charlie Blackmon was hitting about 500 until the other day when he went 0 for 4. So they're getting good performances up and down the lineup, and the rotation is solidifying things. You also always have to look at this bullpen, which always can implode. But right now, the Rockies are off to a good start. It's a tough division that they're in, but I think this is going to be a team at the very least that will make the playoffs in a year where we're going to have 16 teams make the postseason. And then the other team that's stocked up in a big way is the Chicago Cubs. They are off and flying at 13-3, and you have to like the change at the managerial spot. I think it's made a big difference. They look like they have a new energy. They look like they have a new edge, and that is what David Ross has brought. And I've always looked at this team, looked at them on paper, and said they have a ton of talent. It's just a matter of putting the pieces into place. And early on, they're doing just that. Yesterday, they got a great performance from Yu Darvish, flirted with a no-hitter as they knocked off the Brewers. And you know about the core guys, the Anthony Rizzos and the Chris Bryants and the Javi Baezes. But this year is about getting a couple of those others to step up and show what they can do. And one guy who has stepped up in that category is Ian Happ, playing very well to start the year. Wilson Contreras as well. So this is a team that's very deep. I like the rotation, especially if Yu Darvish is going to pitch the way he did yesterday, and he's off to a good start. You know you have an anchor in John Lester who knows around any game he's ever pitched. Kyle Hendricks has been compared to Greg Maddux at different points in his career, so this team can get the job done, and they're off to a great start. The one question becomes the ninth inning, where Craig Kimbrell has been a disaster. He just cannot find the plate. He's walking people all over the place. So he's been removed from the closer's role, and Rowan Wick has stepped in and done the job now with 3 saves. So I look at this team, and I think they're pretty complete right now, and I would say look out rest of the National League because the Cubs mean business in 2020. Now to a couple of teams in the other direction, and the first one, they just seem to be perennially disappointing, and that is the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, who I was high on during the offseason. Some of the moves they made, bringing in Anthony Rendon, bringing in a couple pitchers to improve that starting rotation. Well, there have been a lot of problems here with the Angels. Now, first of all, you start with the fact that Mike Trout has been Superman, and he's just not getting a lot of help, and hasn't that been the theme of his career? Shohei Ohtani's already not pitching. He's limited to just hitting. You have to wonder what the future is of two-way player for him, or really anyone, if it's really something that is feasible, because Ohtani is showing that it's just so difficult to do. And he had 2 starts this year. He was wild, he was all over the place, and then he was hurt. So he's not going to pitch anymore, and he hasn't gotten off to a very good start with the bat. And then Rendon started the year injured. He had an oblique issue, has yet to really hit the ground running since coming back. So the Angels just haven't clicked offensively. Pitching-wise, you know, it's always going to be a work in progress, but one enormous bright spot has been Dylan Bundy, who I thought a change of scenery from pitching in Baltimore was going to benefit him in a big way, and he's off to a great start. You're talking about a Cy Young contender through the first third of the season. We'll see if he's able to keep that up, but if they can just find a way to get some good performances from other guys in this rotation, I can't count this team out, but because they're off to a poor start and they're not getting a lot of support for Mike Trout, who, as we now know, is now a father, and you're seeing hashtag dad strength trending all over the place, and he's hitting the ball to the moon. But the guy needs help. That's the bottom line. It's what the Angels are going to have to hope for if they can get things turned around off to a slow start under Joe Madden in his first year. And then the other team, as we move back to the National League West, is the Diamondbacks. And I put them here because there's 2 other teams that have jumped ahead of them in this division. And you looked at the division going in, you said Dodgers head and shoulders above the rest of the competition. You thought Arizona maybe second. Well, now they've fallen behind both Colorado, who I talked about, and San Diego and all their young talent off to a fine start. And there's concerns with the Diamondbacks because they spent a lot of money on Madison Bumgarner, and he's already on the shelf. Not pitching well, and the most alarming thing about it was he wasn't even reaching 88 miles an hour on the radar gun. So I think there has to be big concern for a guy who has logged so many innings in his career, and you factor in the postseason as well. That's why, to me, it was not a natural fit in Arizona. It's not a great pitcher's park. I just question the move for the Diamondbacks because I didn't know what direction they were heading with this team. They had just traded Zach Greinke the previous year to Houston, Paul Goldschmidt in the previous offseasons. I don't know if they're all in or are they retooling. That's my issue with the Diamondbacks. Haven't gotten off to a very good start. Now, Ketel Marte is proving that he's legit, and Starling Marte, who they got in a trade from the Pirates, off to a very good start. Other than that, though, they haven't gotten a lot of contributions from the lineup. And so they are where they are right now, which is under 500, and it's going to be a fight for them to stay competitive in that National League West. And now we introduce the new segment that we're going to do here each week during the season, and that's where we take a look at one series to watch this weekend. And ordinarily you'd look at the Yankees and the Red Sox, and that would always be a popular choice here, but not this year with the way the Red Sox are. So I'm going to take a look at Cleveland and Detroit as they will meet this weekend at Comerica Park. And this is an interesting series on a lot of levels. The Indians have pitched brilliantly. They haven't hit at all, but now their rotation has taken a couple of hits because a couple of their starters decided to break protocol and go out during the night in Chicago and now are forced to quarantine. So that leaves their rotation a little bit thinner. By that, we're talking about Zach Plesac and Mike Clevenger, who are 2 of the key starters, both of them pitching very well to start the year. Now, everyone who's pitching for the Indians has been great. Shane Bieber, Carlos Carrasco. But now they get a Detroit team which is over 500. Nobody saw it coming. And this is the kind of series now, if you're the Tigers and you want to make a run at the playoffs where they have a shot because of the start they've gotten off to and the fact that we're going to see 16 teams make it. Well, now is your opportunity to play a team in your division when they're not at full strength, take advantage of their somewhat weakened starting rotation, and see if you can kind of keep the winning ways going. And the Tigers have gotten some surprise performances, most notably Jacoby Jones, who's hitting out of the 9th spot in the lineup. He's already got 5 or 6 home runs, OPS over 1,000. So he's breaking out in a big way. And, they made some moves in the offseason to improve the offense. They brought in Jonathan Scope and C.J. Cron. So you figured they were going to be better than the disaster they were a season ago, but I don't think anybody saw an over 500 record coming. But hey, that's this season. I knew looking at this year going in, there were going to be some surprise results. There's no doubt about it. And that's exactly what we've seen. So you look at that series this weekend, can Cleveland with a compromised rotation go into Detroit and kind of re-solidify the power in that division? The Twins are a formidable group, the Bomba Squad as they're known in the American League Central, but the Indians are still a contender with that rotation, and if they can get anything out of that lineup, which has been amongst the worst in the game, and Francisco Lindor's year is yet to get started for the Indians. That one I'll have my eye on this weekend. And now just to run through the matchups for your Friday night. And to start, we got one game that is going to be resumed from suspension. That's the Orioles and the Nationals. And Baltimore, for whatever reason, had its way with Washington in that series. They have a 5-2 lead once that one resumes at 5:05 p.m. this evening. The Mets start a weekend set in Philadelphia, and they have Jacob deGrom. And what a joy it is to watch him pitch every 5th day, off to another terrific start. He's already got 2 wins, which that's saying something for Jacob deGrom. So anytime he's on the mound, you feel great about the Mets' chances. And my MLB app is displaying TBD for Philadelphia, so unfortunately no starter listed. We know they're going to see Zach Wheeler later in the weekend, and that will be interesting, his first start against his old team. Then the Nationals and the Orioles have another game scheduled tonight. Steven Strasburg makes his second start of the year. He's opposed by the lefty Tommy Malone. Rays and the Blue Jays in an American League East tilt in, oh, that's right, Buffalo. I was going to say Toronto. I guess this year we're going to have to call the Blue Jays the Toronto Blue Jays of Buffalo, or maybe the Buffalo Blue Jays of Toronto. I don't know. Whichever one you like better, you can go with that. Trevor Richards is on the mound for Tampa. Tanner Roark takes the ball for the Jays. As for the aforementioned Red Sox and Yankees from Yankee Stadium, and this is an example. The Red Sox tonight are throwing Colton Brewer. I mean, they're just throwing any reliever out there just to get any kind of innings. It has just not been pretty, especially when the opposition tonight, Garrett Cole. So that's pretty good when you're flipping through the channels tonight. You can watch Garrett Cole pitch for the Yankees and Jacob deGrom for the Mets. Good night of baseball viewing. Indians and Tigers, like I talked about, Aaron Savali and Ivan Nova is the matchup in Detroit. Pirates and the Reds. Pirates crushed Cincinnati yesterday. Tonight it'll be Chad Kuhl and Sonny Gray, who continues his role for the Reds after a not-so-good stay in the Bronx, as Yankee fans know. Braves and the Marlins tonight from Miami. Significant because the Marlins are playing their home opener. They played 12 games. All of them have been on the road to this point. And tonight the matchup, Kyle Wright for Atlanta. Pablo Lopez off to a fine start for the Marlins. The Royals will be in Minnesota this evening. Matchup there, Jacob Junis against Jake Odorizzi. Brewers and the Cubs from Wrigley Field. Underwhelming start for the Brewers, and Christian Yelich has been in a major slump to start the year. Brandon Woodruff against Tyler Chatwood. That one can be seen as part of an MLB Tonight broadcast on MLB Network tonight, so something new that they're doing there. The Rangers and the Rockies from Colorado. That's Lance Lynn and Ryan Castellani, rookie right-hander. Mariners and the Astros from Houston. Yusei Kikuchi opposes Framber Valdez. Dodgers and the Angels from Angel Stadium. It's Clayton Kershaw on the mound against fellow left-hander Patrick Sandoval. The Padres will meet the Diamondbacks in Arizona this evening. Dinelson Lamet, talk about Cy Young winners to this point this season. Look no further than the young Padre right-hander Lamet. 2-0, 1.61. Merrill Kelly provides the opposition for Arizona. And finally, out in the Bay Area, the A's and the Giants from that beautiful ballpark in San Francisco. Frankie Montas and Johnny Cueto are your starters there. There's only one game postponed on this slate. It is the Cardinals and the White Sox. St. Louis still not ready to go after their team-wide COVID-19 outbreak. The plan right now is to resume action tomorrow, where they will play a doubleheader. That's an interesting series because the White Sox are really interesting with all their young talent that they have, and we've seen the start Luis Robert has gotten off to. A lot to like about that team in the years to come. And with that, we will move over to this day in baseball history, and it was on this day, August the 14th, 1987, when Mark McGwire's 39th homer of the season set a new MLB record for home runs by a rookie. Big Mac would finish the year with 49. And finally, we end the program with the ninth inning, and you might have noticed last night, Mookie Betts for the Dodgers in a blowout win over the Padres. They won it 11-2. And Betts went 4 for 4 with 3 home runs. 6th career 3-homer game for the superstar. Notable because he matches the Major League record as he joins Johnny Mize and Sammy Sosa as the only 2 others in history to have 6 career 3-homer games. And oh, by the way, Betts locked up with the Dodgers for the next 12 years. I think they're very much liking the early returns on that deal. And with that, that closes this edition of the Brian on Baseball podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Our thanks, as always, go to Dylan DePrado, whose setup we use each and every week. We'll be back with you next week. Enjoy your weekend at baseball. It's good to be back talking baseball with games on the field. Thanks again for joining us, and feel free to follow me on Twitter at Brian Gadsword. I'm Brian Gadsword. Thanks again. So long.